It's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White, and welcome to episode 258, the cursed one. Shaka, his guts in his hands. Welcome to the week of 27 November 2022. We are back in Rhode Island, and I hope all our American friends had a happy Thanksgiving holiday. We've got today lots of nudity, Tik Tok, Twitter, Festo, IABS, IABS, that sounds like a disease. IABs, Meta, Jason Wood, and more on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
How is your business staying one step ahead of cyber criminals? Secure your email applications, network, and data with Barracuda. Protect your business and go from zero to security in no time flat. Whether your team is working in one location or many, Barracuda has solutions that are easy to buy, deploy, and use. Learn how Barracuda can protect your business against ransomware, phishing, and other cyber attacks. Visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Barracuda, your journey secured. All right, we're here on the cursed episode of Security Weekly, but we'll get there. We're gonna hang in there and try to survive. I don't know if you can hear the music playing, but I can. So if you still, there we go. It was so loud that I couldn't concentrate. So if you still allow TikTok on your network, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. Apparently, there's a new round of malware being distributed that's related to a current TikTok challenge, which is called the invisible body filter. Now, I saw this story because, the minute I saw naked, I was like, I'm there, dude. So the challenge apparently is to get naked. That's step one, so that's always appealing. And then film yourself naked. Okay, wait. Now, that's always an intro to a bad idea. But then, after you film yourself naked, you apparently use the TikTok invisible body filter, which sounds suspicious in and of itself. But you do that and replace your body with a blurry background. So you've probably seen these. So now look, kids, and I know I should be on the front porch shouting at clouds right now, but any challenge to start off with film yourself naked is probably not going to end well. I mean, I don't care where you got that from, some local person asked you or, whatever. But, I know if it's too loud, you're too old. But anywho, the naked thing aside, basically on the heels of a fill in the name of a person or object you find attractive, allegedly doing the naked flappy mambo on film, well, here come the X-ray spec vendors who's going to tell you that they can give them a chance. They will remove the clothes, or in this case, the filter, and let you see everything. Of course, much like the horrible letdown you got when you first bought the X-ray specs when you were like 8 years old and you saved up, your quarter a week allowance to buy them, and the blur removal creamer doesn't do anything except it installs WASP Stealer on your device, which is then capable of getting your Discord account information, your password, your credit cards, cryptocurrency wallets. It can exfiltrate local files, pretty much anything, which is what happens when you try to download this. So TikTok accounts at LearnCyber and at CodyBTC are now suspended, but apparently created a supposed video and app to remove the filter on the invisible body filter challenge. And they stored this on a Discord server named Space Unfilter. So like most promises of a glimpse of, you're so vain, I bet you think this post is about you. But not only do you not get the X-ray specs, but you did get a nice info stealer for your trouble. So I guess the point here is that just because they promised you that you could see whomever that was doing the challenge naked, you probably won't, and they'll steal all your info at the same time, and you'll probably be too embarrassed to go complain about it, because what are you going to do? Call the police and go, hey, I was trying to remove the clothes. Yeah, okay, you don't want to go there. As Twitter continues to bang its little bird head against the picture window of life before slowly giving up the ghost laying on your deck in a sad little puff of feathers before it gets eaten by some large red-eyed thing that sort of lurked out of the undergrowth, muttering about Yog Sothoth, well, more bad news for Twitter. over 5.4 million Twitter user records, which contain non-public information, were stolen using an API vulnerability, which was actually fixed in January. And I think all this data was stolen before that. Initially, I thought it was a new breach, but I think it's just related to the old breach. The attackers shared all this data, this 5.4 million records, for free on a hacker forum. Now, and they allege that another possibly much larger data dump of Twitter records that was caused by this same vulnerability may also exist. So back in July, someone was selling private information from Twitter for the 5.4 million accounts for $30,000. So they were saying they would sell this whole collection. I think it was mostly email and phone numbers, which sounds a little steep, $30,000 for that. But the data did include, among other things, phone numbers and email addresses. The data had apparently been collected back in December of 2021 before they patched the API. The data was then shared for free on the 24th of November. So maybe they didn't get the money, maybe they got enough money, I don't know. But the data was validated as being the same as the data that was for sale earlier this year and represents 5,485,635 Twitter user records. The belief is that the other data dump is similar. And Chad Loader, who was suspended from Twitter, mind you, posted that the new data dump may contain tens of millions of records and posted that on Mastodon, which is now a competitor of Twitter. The sample in the article that they provided was over 1.3 million phone numbers for French Twitter users. So if you want to call French Twitter users, I guess you get hold of that. Acer patched some high-severity vulnerability that affected a number of their laptop models, which would allow for a local attacker to deactivate UEFI secure boot. Now, I know this is one of Paul's favorite subjects, and he blogs about this stuff all the time. And he has more detailed explanations than we have time for about how UEFI works and all these low-level rings and all these things. But essentially, secure boot is a service that tries to ensure that the operating system and things that are being loaded as part of that boot up process are actually validated using the trusted platform chip and the UEFI firmware to limit the ability of rootkits or bootkits, more likely, to execute during the startup of the device. So if it tries to load a bootkit or something, theoretically anyway, that will stop it. ESET originally reported that a flaw in a DXE driver on some Acer notebooks as well as Lenovo notebooks they talked about earlier. Acer recommends that you update your BIOS ASAP. And like I said, Lenovo has a patch as well. And for back in January, Acer went on to say that they did believe there would be Windows updates for this as well. So if you have Acer equipment, you may want to check on that. According to this article, cyber criminals have changed how they target financials, which is kind of interesting to me. As the holiday season kicks off, about 80% of the attackers that were in this study, or I guess they were observing, about 80% of the attacks were going after vulnerable customers rather than targeting the institutions directly. So Akamai found a 257% increase in the number of web apps and API attacks against the financial sector in the past year. And I don't know exactly how they measured some of this. Maybe in their full report, I didn't get a chance to read the entire report. But they said that 40% of the attacks that they observed were focused on account takeover attempts, and another 40% were focused on website scraping to create phishing scams. So it sounds like maybe that financials have secured a lot of stuff and it's harder to get in. So now they're starting to rely on building access to these networks. So if you're working for the financials, this may mean a new level of diligence on your part to try to prevent compromise of end-user accounts, which is going to be a real challenge. When you start trying to talk to end users about not, doing this and not doing that and trying to enforce this stuff, it just lights up the help desk Christmas tree. Verdere Labs announced 3 new vulnerabilities which can be used to attack automated industrial control systems, and also a popular piece of software that's used to manage millions of smart devices and critical infrastructure. The bugs allow for logic manipulation and denial of service on products from 2 major German vendors, Festo, who makes automated controllers, and CodeSys Runtime, which is a runtime environment that's used on Festo controllers, and it's also used on all kinds of other stuff. The flaws were found as a part of a large research project that they were conducting called OT icefall, where they were assessing infrastructure components and OT devices. So if you're using Festo or CodeSys-based devices, you may want to check with them. At the time the story was written, they did not have a response from either Festo or CodeSys about what the plan was moving forward. So you may want to take extra action to isolate those devices in your networks. Cybel, researchers observed initial access brokers, which are called IABs, selling access to enterprise networks, which were compromised via a recently patched Fortinet vulnerability. And we've reported that before. The vulnerability is an authentication bypass, which allows special HTTP or HTTPS packets to be sent, which will then perform an authorized operation on, wait for it, the admin interface of Fortinet equipment. So obviously this is pretty bad. Once that happens, the attacker can actually establish an SSH connection into the device and take over the entire operation of it. That they could change your firewalls. They could do just about anything once they get to that point. And if they can do that, that gives them, wide open access into your internal networks. Cybel said that they currently, according to their scans, which I presume they did with Showdown or something like that, there's over 100,000 FortiGate firewalls that are accessible on the internet. I think the story was dated like maybe yesterday, or maybe it was even today, but that any of these may be a target if they have not been patched. Cybel said that they had observed a threat actor distributing multiple unauthorized Fortinet VPN access codes, or I presume account information, on a Russian cybercrime forum. So they're actively exploiting this stuff if you have not patched. So attacks using the compromise have been going on since the 17th of October. So if you've got Fortinet, I would be checking to see if you need to patch that up right away. Meta, who is the owner of Facebook and other things, was found to be in violation of the General Data Protection Regulation Rules, which is GDPR, by the Irish government. And so basically they were evaluating this, and they fined them 265 million euros and issued requirements that they must make cybersecurity changes after a breach that occurred in April of 2021. So this was a while ago, but they're paying for it now. The breach basically allowed for massive data scraping, which exfiltrated massive amounts of collated personal user data. Now, I realize 265 million euros is about like me getting that 115 franc fine in Luzerne, but it does seem that things more like this are starting to happen. We've been seeing more prosecution. We've been seeing more litigation and other things about people being, inconvenienced, losing money, losing their personal data, and so forth. Hopefully, there's going to be some kind of privacy protection like this, maybe starting to develop in the United States sometime pretty soon. I think we need to start addressing this. I know certain states in the United States are doing that, but we need I think we need some federal stuff. But who knows? It's a lame duck session of Congress, so we'll see. Well, on the third Thursday of November, the Blaue Kalkwin Manna rises from the crypt and brings little good children blood, sausages, and peat moss, and bad children get sent to work in the medieval glass factory. And every year, he plays the Blaue Kalkwin Manna in the famous Kindred Parade, tossing out treacle candy and gum rubber boots for all the attendees. So please welcome the Blue Turkey Man himself, Jason Wood.
And what a good time it is for everybody who attends. You all may have noticed that we spent a lot of time talking about online criminal activity. I don't know if you noticed that. I've talked about groups and intrusions and things like that have occurred here in the United States, Russia, China, Eastern Europe, more and more from there. Today, I ran into an article on The Guardian that covered warnings from law enforcement about activity that is originating from African nations, and it is basically commenting on their growth and the better impact, I guess, or for them, I guess, the higher impact there. We'll use higher impact that these groups are starting to have in the scams that are being performed now. So now I can add a new continent to the stories I've talked about. As long as we exclude that Nigerian prince that keeps emailing me. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll get Antarctica as two, because some researcher down there will be using a VPN so they can watch a ball game and get around geographic restrictions. To be candid, I haven't really spent much time looking on e-crime activity coming out of Africa. So there was a lot of the background reading here that was new to me. The Guardian opens up basically with a notice from law enforcement stating that gangs located in Africa are becoming more organized and more effective at what they're doing. And they have very little risk of getting caught or imprisoned or anything like that. So, it's pretty much game on. This is not an unusual feature for groups that tend to thrive a bit more, as they have less to worry about with law enforcement. According to Professor Landry Sign of the Brookings Institute, there's a quote, states across Africa have emerged as a favorite target, not just a location for it to be originate from, but a target of cyber criminals with costly consequences, end quote. Interpol states that most of the scams in Africa focus on banking and credit card fraud. So, try and get money to be sent out and try and send it to a bank, illegitimate bank account, things like that. The article covers some of the successes that law enforcement agencies have had, such as Interpol, against these groups. They cite one operation that recently resulted in the arrest of 70 people with links to a criminal group named Black Axe, which is located in South Africa, Nigeria, and the Ivory Coast. They're just kind of spread all around the area. Plus, they have operations in Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and the United States. And there were some discussions of arrests made in different countries like Ireland, with ties to this group. So they're pretty much everywhere. Now, I had never heard of Black Axe, so that turned into a little bit of a rabbit hole for me to dig into. It turns out Black Axe is a break-off group from a university student group that was started in the 1970s. That was named the Neo-Black Movement of Africa. And their symbol was a black axe breaking chains. And their aim was basically to fight oppression. This is in particular, you're dealing with South African apartheid in that time period, as well as other forms of oppression. Somewhere along the way, Black Axe broke off from them and became a very violent criminal group, as well as doing a lot of online fraud. In fact, I was searching on Black Axe specifically. I found an article on the BBC that covered some of their history, what's involved with becoming a member of Black Axe. In fact, their description of that initiation process was pretty gruesome. Not something I would want to volunteer for. That article estimates that we've got about 30,000 members at the time that they published it. I think it was in 2021, that are members of Black Axe. Which makes 70 arrests that I mentioned just now. Previously, that's a drop in the bucket. Most of the group's revenue actually comes from online fraud. This is where you get into things like romance, inheritance, real estate, and business email scams. Trying to get people to send money to places that they think they're getting something. They're, having somebody, like a romance scam, try and arrange to meet up with somebody, and they need some money to travel, or who knows. And basically, Black Axe uses, has blueprints, is what they call it, that they distribute internally to their members to teach them how to perform these types of scams, and then these folks just go to town on their victims. Going back to the Guardian article, it has a section where it discusses law enforcement's impact on the group, or any of these groups. And they ask the question, how much of a difference is this really making? And there are some differing opinions here. Rory Corcoran, who is the head of Interpol's Financial Crime and Anti-Corruption Center, is cited as saying that their arrests caused significant disruption, a significant disruptive effect on the group. Mostly because in the process, it sounds like, they've made improvements in the communication between banks and law enforcement and tracking these funds and being able to seize it before it gets out of their control and then returning it to the victims. A former South African criminal intelligence official cautioned against exaggerating the impact of any arrests, basically saying that this is going to be a speed bump, barely, for the criminals. It doesn't really have any effect on them, which if we're measuring the number of arrests made, 70 people in an organization of 30,000, that's not a terrible lot. So probably fairly low impact to the operations. particularly if they're kind of decentralized in how they teach this and spread it around. I'm not sure how that works, but there has a feeling of being rather decentralized in some of this. At the same time, though, the Guardian cites the fact that, or cites Interpol as saying that they seized $120 million last year from Black Axe and other groups. Now, that does cause some of these groups some pain. Most organizations don't like to lose $120 million in revenue in 1 year. So potentially the improvements in the tracking and the seizing of funds will have a much higher impact as far as the arrests and actually hurting the groups. What I found to be interesting about this was just, and this is me just kind of speculating a bit here, what impact, how will these groups evolve? We're talking a lot about some of the more, sophisticated type of attacks that are coming out of criminal groups in Eastern Europe, Russia, other locations throughout the world. We talked a lot about the ransomware operations and the whole economy that they have there. Perhaps these African groups might look at this and decide, hey, what can we learn here? Can we do any better with our, with the money that we're trying to make? They might look at it and say, not what we have is working just fine. No need to make any changes. Or somebody might come up with a clever idea to make it even more profitable, and they decide to go down that route. Or who knows? Maybe they decide because we're losing money through the improved seizing of funds, we need to evolve and we're going to change. So it'll be interesting. It's, maybe we'll see more activity coming out of this area and more stories around this. One thing, though, that I looked at, as interesting as it is to me to learn about the individual groups, and there was a lot to learn here, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for us as defenders too much who it is that's executing these types of scams or attacks. Our goal is to defend our organizations and those around us. And so, it adds some color. It helps with the storytelling behind that. But really, how are they doing this? What are the types of steps that they take in that? Those are the things that we need to know to learn how to defend against them. So as this evolves, if it goes from, these, like I said, romance scams or things like that are more one-on-one to if it changes to something that's more focused on an organization, these would be things that we need to be aware of and keep an eye out. So, this is just something for me to track and see, how this develops, and maybe we'll have more to talk about. If this is of interest to you, check out the show notes.
All right. Thank you, Jason. That's just the internet making everybody standing on a subway platform in Queens at 3 o'clock in the morning in 1976. It's like used to, you had to go out of your way to get in jams like that, but now it's like they have access to everybody everywhere, and I definitely agree that as defenders, that makes our job more challenging because like that story earlier about financials being targeted through user accounts, that's exactly what these guys are specialists at. So they know how to target individuals. So be sure your people are aware that scams like this have been going on since the dawn of time, but now they have 24/7 access to you while you're watching TV online. Finally, I love Scorsese. I do. And with rare exception, he's a great director. And I remember one time I was in a bar and I was talking to Harvey Keitel, and I was thinking, man, it must be great to work with Scorsese. But all I could blurt out was, I've seen you naked a lot, Harvey. Harvey used to do tons of nudity in Scorsese films and otherwise, but that was like his thing. And I was like, so to speak. And Harvey is a super nice person. Don't get me wrong. He was really nice to talk to me, but I'm not really kidding. He of all the men in the world, I've probably seen him naked more than anyone. Thanks, Harvey, for that, but it's not your fault. But anyway, apparently this meme started trending last week, and I saw it. I saw it right away, and basically went, what? There's a 1973 movie with De Niro playing a Russian hitman. I was like, come on. There's no way I haven't seen that movie. And I was like, was I like drunk that night, or did I just wait, what? And so the movie is allegedly titled Goncharov. And it has a backstory. It's got all the actors that were in it. It's got all this information about it. It's got cartoons. It's got all this stuff. And it started to sound like Wag the Dog or Argo or something. Like Like, was this maybe some kind of secret project? There's scene lists, there's fanfic, there's pretty much everything at this point, and it wouldn't surprise me if there's some negative reviews on IMDb by now. Like people like, I hated Goncharov. It was the worst movie ever made. De Niro is overrated in Goncharov. But look, I just want to tell you and set the record straight. It's not real. Now, I tried to call Scorsese this morning, and he didn't take my call. Thanks, Martin. That's why you never won that Academy Award. Actually, you did, but, come on. It wasn't for the good stuff. But, the movie is not real. Goncharov is fake. Somebody made it up as a joke, but it is a lot of fun. Sorry that there's not a cool Russian hitman movie made by Scorsese and De Niro back in 1973. But that's the news. Thanks, Jason, and I will see you on Friday.